Welcome to another podcast episode on CodeStories. In this episode, I'm honored to have a veteran in the software development community as my guest. His name is Stefan and he's from Montreal, Canada. For the past decade, Stefan has been very active in the software development sector as a software developer, programming teacher, writer, and tech entrepreneur. Back in the 90s, Stefan built one of the first websites with colored images. As of today, Stefan is very present on his YouTube channel where he gives advice and shares his thoughts on tech-related topics. Stefan is the president of StudioWeb. StudioWeb is a beginner-friendly, interactive coding e-learning platform that has been adopted by schools since 2011. With StudioWeb, teachers can teach their students web design and programming. Let's get to know more about Stefan. Stefan, hey, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you for taking your time to be my guest. How is the situation in Montreal regarding the pandemic?
Major lockdowns now,
All right.
even curfews.
Uh-huh.
And so there's, so that's it. The city is, I live right in the heart of the city. It doesn't get any more central than where I am, but it's like a ghost town now.
Hmm.
So hopefully this will be resolved fairly quickly.
Okay. You bought enough toilet paper, right?
Yeah, I remember that, the craziness of, panic.
Uh,
Like, we humans like to panic.
yeah, that's true. And the media is not making things better, right? I think sometimes it's better to not just look at anything, just focus on your daily work. If not, you're gonna go crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. We've seen the social media, uh, which are documentaries where they talk about that, where they're just trying to rattle everybody's cage. I don't know if you have that expression in Germany or not, but basically to get everybody emotional.
Yeah.
They want clicks.
All right. So, you've been teaching people software development for a long time, right? Right. And I remember when I started teaching myself how to code, you were also one of the first people let's say, discovered on YouTube, sharing how to learn software development, um, sharing your experience, teaching people, and the things you're going to be facing when you are learning software development. And you're always very transparent about how hard it is, but at the same time that it is possible, even if you don't have a background in tech. And I remember you always love to, well, let's say, like to use illustrations from a combat sport. Uh, how
Mhm.
people can train in the gym, and then they go to a real fight, and it's different. And it's the same thing when you teach yourself how to code. You just doing this tutorials with just step by step, and then you go into real life scenario, and things becomes it's more complicated, and you just have to get used to it. You have to go to a fight over and over and over again before you get used to it. Your body get used to it. And you always tell that in your video, you're always telling people to just it's going to be difficult at the beginning, but you just have to be doing it over and over again. And how come that you have this passion for combat sport? I know you said you do combat sport yourself, but I don't know exactly I don't know.
I started. I don't do it anymore because I'm an old man now. But
Yeah, 100,
uh,
120, no, 162 years old, I think that was.
69, 169,
Nice.
169. But I started doing that little joke because people would ask me, "How old are you? How old are you?" It's like 169 years old. And they say, "How rich are you?" I say, "I'm worth 100 billion trillion." So ridiculous questions get answered accordingly. That being said, no, I have a deep background in martial arts. I started doing it when I was 10 years old, and I did it fairly consistently for about 30 years.
Wow.
And all many different styles, competitive. I was going to become a pro fighter at one point, but then illness struck that down. But I lived in the gym. It was my passion for decades. many different styles from boxing, wrestling, kung fu's, kembo, et cetera, et cetera. And I was a bouncer in a nightclub, so I put it to test for over a couple of years working in different clubs. And there's, when you get in the ring and you've done the academic martial arts and you've done the real stuff, you start to get a picture about reality. And those lessons from martial arts transfers into business, transfers into coding, and they're just universal truths. And so practicality is everything. So, I learned that from my boxing coach, who was a world-class fighter. You learn your basics well, and then you just jump in the ring, and then we would work together, and we'd be sparring full contact, and he'd be correcting me. Okay, no, you did this wrong. Okay, let's go boom, boom, boom. We do this wrong, boom, boom, boom.
Mm.
So then when I went into software development, I brought in my business skills and structural skills, and I brought in my martial arts background. I approached software the same way, and it's 100% applicable. You learn your fundamentals, so you understand the lay of the land, if you will, and then you just got to get in there and apply. Software development is not about cookie cutter formulas. It's about figuring out a problem and understanding the technologies that you have available to you, whether it be languages or libraries or frameworks, and then knowing when to apply them and how to apply them intelligently. And that comes with experience. So I teach people do fundamentals, get into a couple of projects, then learn design patterns and learn refactoring, and away you go.
Yeah, great. And something I always my this also my experience is choking in the ring, right? I mean, after you've practiced and you
Yeah.
popped up, you've watched all the courses on Udemy and all this YouTube courses, and then you sit in front of an empty code editor, you choke, right? And this is something that I've been struggling with since I started software development, and even sometimes till today, I still have to like. I mean, Google for answers is just part of the game, right? You just have to.
Mhm.
But if you don't have that instructor telling you, okay, it's time to do this, it's time to do that, you get it's especially in the beginnings, it's really hard to do things on your own. And that's a really great illustration when you're using boxing or using combat sport, that you just have to be exposed to this environment over and over and over again, and it's going to be part of your system. Great. Thank you very much. And you're also into MMA, right? I guess.
Yes,
You watched the fight recently with who was Conor
Conor McGregor. I don't pay
McGregor?
attention to.
All right.
Say again?
I think it was Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier. Or his name. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Conor lost this time. I don't pay as close attention to it as I used to. Um, but yeah, I used to be a huge fan. Well, a huge fan. I used to watch. I was more into boxing, strangely enough, even though I actually trained in an MMA gym with professional MMA fighters. I wasn't. But like Georges St. Pierre, I used to train in one of the gyms he trained in all the time. I sparred with him a couple of times in
Oh,
boxing.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. To me, it's like it became a kung fu in the sense that it became something to practice for the sake of practicing it. I
Mm,
was so into like the body mechanics and motion and timing and tactics. And when you're younger, you're into techniques, kind of like being into tutorials. When you're younger, you figure, oh, it's all you're looking for the special technique, in martial arts, dragon plucks eye, and you figure, oh, that's the special technique. And a lot of young coders think in those ways as well, in terms of if they just learn the right language or they find the right stack, then they'll get the job. But it's not that.
yeah.
It's about fundamentals. It's like you learn in fighting. If somebody has a really good punch, just a jab and good timing and
Mm,
good tactics and good mental and physical conditioning, they'll beat the guy who's got 10,000 fancy techniques.
mm. Yeah, great. Yeah, I also learned that from you to focus on the fundamentals. Even till today, it's been almost 3 years now. When I started learning software development, I am always trying to focus on the fundamentals because there's so many fancy stuff out there, all the new libraries, the
Mhm.
all the fancy the program languages out there, and kind of distracted, and they're very attractive, right? Okay, let me try this new, I don't know, Node thing, and there's React JS and that JS, and then people are caught up in this environment, and they start like creating stuff, but they don't know the fundamentals. I've seen people who have as an iOS developer, I have some connection with other iOS developers, and they have apps on the App Store, but they don't even know which design pattern they use for their apps. So there was a
Mm.
guy. He has a really cool app on the App Store, and it's actually pretty successful. And I asked him, "Hey, look, man, your app is really great. Which design pattern that you use? Like design pattern? What's that?" I'm like, "Wow." So focusing on the fundamentals is really good, and you always say that in your videos, in your content. So how did you got into coding actually? Was it something that was always, were you always into coding from when you were a kid, when, I don't know, in school, or how do you got into coding?
Well, when I was a kid, we got I'm dating myself, like a VIC 20 and a TR, and I just did basic little things, but I wasn't a coder geek or anything. But what happened was, I guess it was 94. I had my business going, and it had nothing to do with technology. And my brother said to me, "You should put up a website." And I said, "What's a website?" And so it was so young back then, and so I taught myself just basic HTML. CSS wasn't a thing, and a bit of Perl, and I just put up my first website. I had one of the first websites in the world. I had one of the first websites with color images. I remember
Hmm.
I was considered a master webmaster because I could put up a color picture of a fish that loaded within 30 seconds, and that's how primitive it was back then. That's how I learned to code, just to put up a site for my own business. And then when I sold that out of that business, I decided to get into the whole web game because it was fun for me, and it was a new market. So I figured, why not?
Hmm. Great. And you've been doing that for a long time now, right?
Since I started writing, I wrote my first code in '94,
Hmm.
and in '96 I went full time freelance. And then the StudioWeb, which is my learning SaaS, it was originally my web design studio, which I registered at in '98. But I operated under another name before that, and I had a small crew under me. And then after a few years of doing that, freelancing, then you graduate from freelancing solo to getting a small crew under you. And then I said, well, I didn't want to become a jobber, and it's just personality choice. And then I started developing, experimenting with my own software, my own SaaSes, if you will.
Hmm.
And just from there, but at some point you have to make a decision whether you're going to be in code or in management, if you will, or in code and in concepts. You can't do both at the same time at some point. At least I can't.
Hmm.
So I don't write code actively these days, but I do occasional code inspections on my SaaS, but that's about it. I trust my guys.
Hmm. And when you got started, which what were what challenges were you facing? Was software development something that you got up that you learned fast, or were you also having your difficulties?
Well, I ran into kind of the tutorial-itis of the day, in the sense of book-itis. So I would buy all these books, and at one point I had a budget of $3,000 to $4,000 a year on tech books. The videos didn't exist at the
Mm.
time. They weren't out there if they did exist. Anyway, and I remember when I was first learning JavaScript back in '95, when it first came out, I got JavaScript Unleashed. I still remember that book, big thick book. And I read the book, and I would take notes and I read it, but I wouldn't write code. And theoretically, you could ask me, how do you do this in JavaScript? I could tell you, you do this, and this. I remember one day when I finally sat down to write the code, it was like you choke. You're like, and you write a bit of code, doesn't work. Why isn't it working? Even though theoretically you thought you were pretty good, but you don't really know until you get your hands dirty in the code. And I call that the nerd eyes. You got to develop that ability to see the code and read it. And I call it nerd eyes. And the only way you get that is by writing code.
Hmm. Great. And in how you've been all living in Canada all your life?
Yep,
All
yep,
right.
yep, yep.
How is the software development community in Canada, or let's say let maybe the tech the community as a whole?
It's one of the world leaders because about 20 years ago, the local governments, the provincial governments, which is the equivalent of the state government, gave a bunch of tax breaks and subsidies to big corporations. So, like for example, within a block or two from me, I have Microsoft, Google, EA Games, Ubisoft is maybe 10 minutes drive from me. So there's a really big, strong tech community. Montreal is one of the world's leaders in AI, if not the world's leaders. Some of the biggest AI names have come from our local university, McGill, which is literally 2 blocks from my place. So it's a hub. It's a hub for technology, no question about it.
Hmm, that's great. And things like boot camps, schools, software development schools, are they also popular in Canada?
Well, they're here. I don't know their level of popularity. I don't follow that, but they're definitely here.
Mm,
There's no question about that.
mm, okay. If you weren't into software development, what would you have been doing all these years?
I don't know. Well, if I hadn't gotten sick, I would have became a professional fighter, and now I probably wouldn't be able to speak very well. So that's a good thing. Um, I don't know. I'd be in some sort of business. It's
Mm,
for me, the technology was a means to an end.
mm,
My goal was not to be a software developer. It was just I saw software development as a very important tool to have as an entrepreneur. That's all.
mm.
That makes sense.
Okay. Um, as someone who have been in software development for such a long time, what do you see in the current, let's say, in the current state of software development, especially there are a lot of sites who teach software development, who teach coding, computer science. What are some of the flaws that you see in these courses? Because like you've been doing it since '94, and you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly stuff of software development. And how can you? What is your experience with the latest schools and tutorials and all those things you can find on the internet?
Well, I don't know everybody, but I know there's it's a bunch of people who are clear to me who are teaching don't actually have any or very little work experience. It's very obvious to me. And another problem is that a lot of them don't know how to teach. Teaching is a skill and a talent that come from family teachers. And the problem with that is that you get people who do a course on the usual places and they don't understand, they don't learn, and they figure, oh, it's just not for me. But
Mm,
I would say the vast majority of times it's just that the teachers is teaching the teachers it's not for them. You know, they don't know how to teach, and also they make these statements about how it is, what's it like to be in a professional context, and it's clear they've never been.
mm,
So, and then you see a lot of these tutorial makers. I've talked to some of them. They tell me they'll just copy other people's tutorials. They'll see there's a certain hot stack, so they'll run over, copy somebody's tutorial, and they're all copying each other's tutorials. And it's kind of that, it's there's the big money grab, I suppose. Some are good. Don't get me wrong. There are some good ones.
mm,
But if you ask me to criticize, that's what I've noticed quite a bit. And a lot of people who do my stuff, this is the story I hear over and over and over again. I thought I couldn't understand. I didn't understand. I didn't know what to do. I thought I wasn't able to do this. I do, of course, I understand. And that's the unfortunate reality of the situation. But on the flip side, if you know what you're doing, you have so much content out there, free and otherwise, quality otherwise, that if you once you know what you're doing, I tell people, I could produce all kinds of tutorials on this stack and that stack and I can sell that if I wanted to, but you don't need to because once you've learned the fundamentals, then you just go to the what you just go to node.org or whatever it is and just do the hello world and then you'll be able to get going without needing to get a course. You know what I mean?
great, great. And you mentioned that you come from t- uh, teacher family, right?
Yes.
And I also noticed that. being a good coder or being a good software developer doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a good teacher in teaching software development. And I've also experienced that, and not only or seen these kind of things, not just in software development, but on in all different kind of professions out there. I know. Do you watch football, soccer? You
Yep.
and there are some of these great players, soccer player, and then later in their career they become a manager or coach, and they're really bad at it. They're not. I'm not gonna say. I'm not gonna say any names, but you can just see that just because you were good at a certain subject doesn't necessarily mean that you're good in teaching. And in your videos, you also mentioned that being a teacher is a skill, and being a teacher, you have a certain mindset, right? You approach students differently than someone who doesn't have this background of teaching. And can you give us more insight why having this teacher's mindset is so important when you're teaching something that's something that's such that's as abstract as software development?
Good question. Well, let me establish a foundation by saying the teacher's role. There's two things that you do: simplify and you filter. So simplify is pretty self-explanatory. You take ideas that seem complex and break them down so that everybody can understand. And the filtering is where actually my professional background comes into play, because if you look at any particular language as an example, it's huge, right?
Mm.
But in real life, you only use a very small subset of the language, right? You may only use 10% of it, maybe 20%, maybe 5%. So a good teacher will break down the complexity, but also filter out all the stuff that you don't really need to know. And there are certain key concepts in any subject, really, but we'll talk about software. There are certain key concepts that have to be understood before the student can move forward. So when I like to produce my foundation course, it's much harder work to do that than to produce a tutorial on, how to create a Twitter clone with Node.js.
Mm.
It's much more difficult because you have to expose the student to particular concepts that are foundational before they can move on to the next. And if a student doesn't understand one of these key concepts, everything else falls apart very quickly, right? Because they don't have a leg, they just don't understand. I noticed that in my coding career, whenever I run into some problems when I was trying to understand some architectures, it was usually the reason I had difficulty understanding these complex architectures because there was some layer, think like a sandwich. There was some layer, I just didn't understand that layer well. So, and it was some fundamental
Mm.
concept or principle. So once I understood that, then I was able to, the whole thing made sense. So the tricky thing as a teacher is being able to understand what concepts have to be taught in what order so that the student can move forward very quickly. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Amazing. That's great. That's really that's also something because one of my goal is to also near future to be able to teach other people software development, programming, and I want to be able to not only filter the subject in let's say in a way that the student can can understand certain fundamentals before moving to the next. And the thing that I experience in lots of courses on the internet is they don't teach you things that they don't teach you. There are certain subject that they like overlook. I don't know why they do that. And
Hmm.
those fundamentals, they are so important that if you miss that part, even if you keep going through the course, even if you pass the course and you have your, I don't know, certificate, and you start building things, there's certain key concept that you are not going to be able to understand. And as a teacher, like you already mentioned, you can filter and look, okay, you need to know how to do a jab, for example, right? You need to have to calculate distance between you and your opponent. You need to know how to breathe. You need to know when to counter. You need to know how to grab on all this kind of stuff. But what I see is like you just know how to do that one hit, one punch, And if you can do that punch, and you cool, right? But there's so many other, let's say, components that you need to understand. And like you already mentioned, as a teacher, you can see these things, not just like for yourself, but also um, looking into when you try, for example, when I'm trying to teach someone software development, I always try to understand exactly which concept does this person doesn't understand, which concept is missing, and I'm trying to teach that person. Okay, when it comes to, I don't know, let's say it's the object oriented programming part, and I try to teach them as simple as just try to break things down in a way that that person can understand. I'll use a lot of illustrations. I use I don't know, cars, shoes, all these things you can use to explain these things, and just don't think about the technical stuff. And you do that a lot too. And when I do that, they kind of understand. Okay, software. So objects. This is just like in real life, right? A phone is an object, a bottle is an object, and they all have some kind of properties which describe what the object is, and have methods, and with methods they can communicate with other objects. And these are the kind of things I will also try to not also teach myself, but also teach other people. And yeah, that's really great stuff. I really enjoy your content, and the way you also explain the difference between someone who's a teacher and someone who's not a teacher. Great, thank you.
No, no
And
worries.
and I remember when I watched your video about you mentioned that Swift is dying, or Swift is going to die. I don't know. I
It's
was
a little clickbaiting.
I to be honest, I panicked a little bit because at that time I haven't started working professionally as an iOS developer. I just started learning iOS development, self-taught. I started with web development, and later I switched to iOS development. And then you did this video, iOS Swift is, I forgot the name of the video. And then I watched the video. I'm like, man, what? Am I was this all in vain? Was I learning all this stuff for nothing? But I understood that even in other videos, you were saying that it's the most important thing is to know the concept, right? The fundamentals. If you know the fundamentals, even if it's Swift, if it's Java, JavaScript, Python, you can catch up very fast understanding the fundamentals. So what was that video about actually? Yeah.
Well, it served a few purposes. One, I have like a running joke where I make fun of Ruby. Not that I actually make
Yeah,
fun of
yeah, I
Ruby.
know. And PHP too, right? Was it also PHP? You also make fun of PHP a lot?
No, no, I defend PHP because
PHP,
I'm a
okay.
contrarian.
All right.
Uh, PHP is like it's the redheaded stepchild of the coding world, if you know that expression. It's really it's the town bicycle. Nobody admits they like to ride. It's very popular. But now, going back to the Swift thing, no, it was based partly my tongue-in-cheek thing going on. It's I knew it would rattle some cages, but at the end of the day, um, when you get to a high enough level in software development, you stop thinking in terms of I'm a Swift developer, I'm an Android developer. You have your things that you like to do, but anybody knows after 5-6 years experience, you can pivot from Android to Swift in a matter of weeks, if not sooner. So whether Swift dies or survives it's like worrying about whether a particular mouse manufacturer is going to survive or not.
Mm,
It doesn't matter because you could just pivot off of that. Um, so that was part of that. But also, I also saw that web-based cross-platform solutions, PWAs, and so forth, were getting so powerful, and the smartphones are getting so powerful that the need for native mobile was diminishing. And then I spoke to some friends who worked at very, very large software manufacturers, and they were saying that 99% of their development was now PWA or some other cross-platform solution, simply because it's too expensive to develop an app in Android for Android and then have to develop a whole new code base for iOS. just not practical. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be dead. It's not we don't live in a binary, but I think I just predict, and I still hold to this prediction, that cross-platform solutions like PWA, like perhaps Xamarin, perhaps Flutter, React Native, they were going to be the predominant way in which people are going to develop most apps. Not all, but
Mm,
most, simply because the performance advantages become moot as the frameworks for cross-platform mobile become much more optimized, and because the phones are so powerful now.
mm.
it's like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
great.
that's true.
That
That's
was the
true.
point of that video, really. But
Mm.
you have to inflammatory title. It drove people nuts. I know. I got a lot pretty decent view count, and people were attacking me in other videos, and I would get videos sent to me. Hey, you should see what this
Yeah,
guy
yeah.
said about. I go, I don't care.
Great. And what's your thoughts on Swift UI? Have you looked into it?
No, I haven't. I haven't looked. I'm sure this Apple does a fantastic job with their product, and I'm sure it's fantastic. Don't get me wrong, right? It's just that I always, when I look at tech, and I suggest everybody looks at tech not just based on the merits of the technology, because these days they're all very good. They're all very good. They all have their downs. They all have their ups, but they're all very good. And you should consider the marketability of the tech, the job opportunity, if you're interested in job, or how about the business considerations, right? So if you're a business owner and you're looking at developing, you want to be on mobile, you're going to look at a good developer is going to say, okay, what do you need to do in your app? Does it require native? Because you're doubling your cost doing native development. Or can you just do this with PWA, or which is progressive web app, or maybe you could do it with Flutter or some other
Mm,
cross-platform solution, which will do a real good job. So for example, I have a hard time telling the difference between Instagram PWA versus Instagram native when I use them. I use them back and forth, and they're very close. They're very
mm.
close. Does that make sense? So you got to look at both the business end of it, the job end of it, and the technical end of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think especially for startups who don't they don't have the money to hire a
Yeah.
dedicated Android developer and an iOS developer, they just look for someone who build one who can have one built and then distribute it to different ecosystems. Yeah, I get it. Let's talk about StudioWeb. You started StudioWeb. You launched StudioWeb in 1998, right? Was that right?
No, that was the original. That was when StudioWeb was my web design studio. Like I registered the domain in '98, and then when I shut that down, I started doing SaaS. StudioWeb itself now, as it is today, the application and product is about 10 years old, and it's a software SaaS. Well, it's a software SaaS. It's a SaaS, software as a service, and it for the general public and for schools. And it's a platform that teaches code. It has a huge number of tools that end users, course takers don't see. A lot of classroom management tools that schools use to track student performance and reporting and all this kind of stuff. And that's what StudioWeb is now. So it's an educational platform.
Hmm. And I visited your the StudioWeb website, and you also mentioned there. I read that schools are adopting StudioWeb. What do you mean by that?
Well, they're using it. They use it in the schools. They use it in the classrooms.
Oh,
So
okay,
schools will license the product from us, and they deploy it in the classrooms.
okay.
So
It's
yeah,
web based, right?
yes, yeah, web
Okay,
based.
all right, great.
Again, there was no need for me to go native with that, and in fact, for security reasons, a lot of people don't like downloading application
Yeah, sure.
native apps.
Hmm. And why do you think that StudioWeb is unique? I mean, there's especially when it comes to software, web development and things like
Yeah.
JavaScript, HTML, CSS. There are so many resources out there, and what makes StudioWeb special?
Well, I think first of all, you know, I'm going to sound bad here, but the quality of the videos are very 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 high. first of all. Second of all, it's a platform that was created for code training. So it's not, so it has, the whole structure is very deliberate in terms of how the material is delivered to the students. It's gamified. There's instant help, instant feedback. It's really the software is literally constructed with a deep understanding of how the educational process should be laid out.
Hmm.
And that makes all the difference if you read the reviews. And it makes, so you have a platform that the content and the platform were co-developed. So we released the prototype about 10 years ago, picked up the first couple of schools, and over the years, we refined everything about the software. In fact, we did a total rewrite about a year and a half ago based on everything we knew. And same with the course material. It's all very integrated. So the results speak for themselves. That's what it is. You come out and you get people learn so much more than they thought possible, so very quickly. And that's because of those elements I just spoke about.
Great. And on StudioWeb, you offer HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, SQL, PHP. So do you have any plans to add some more, let's say, other program languages, other maybe something like, I don't know, Flutter, something like maybe native development, native software development language?
Yes. Well, I'm now, what I'm doing is like, if the language courses that I teach, they teach much more than just the languages. The languages courses, the HTML, the JavaScript, the Python, they become vehicles for me in which to teach concepts and technique that are universal. So what people come out of my foundation courses, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, PHP, SQL, they come with a really strong base, and then they feel comfortable going into any specialization on their own. So if they wanted to jump into Node, they could do it pretty easily. They wanted to jump into Python and maybe get into TensorFlow, they could really jump in there, because they'll have that foundation. The analogy I like to make is I don't teach you how to play 10 songs. I teach you how to play music. So I teach you chords and notes and progressions and scales and how to read music and how to hear sound in music. And all of a sudden you can learn to play any song on your own without the need of a teacher. And that's kind of, so the platform is very, very comprehensive in that way. A lot of people have said that when they come out like intermediate level. Even though the courses are called foundations, it's not basics. It goes from basics. Beyond that, what I'm getting into now is more soft skills related things, because to be successful in the software industry, whether you're freelancing or you're working with people, communication skills is huge.
Absolutely.
And so I put out a course. I call it Lizard Wizard. It's a catchy name, and it's about advanced psychology and communication. That's in my mentoring group. It's going to be released to the public soon. And I have a course on just money management. How to, when you start making extra money as a developer, what are you going to do with it? How do you do it? How do you find yourself quickly financially independent? You can do that without having to earn $500,000 a year. And so it's sort of like a life skill type of thing for me. So it's like code as a foundation, and communication and psychology and finance. So I kind of look at it that way, more holistic, as opposed to, because there's plenty of people doing Flutter. There's plenty of people doing Node. There's plenty of people, you can go to them, because once you know the basics, even with the bad teachers, you'll be able to figure it out pretty quickly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. And in your videos, in your content, you talk a lot about lizard brain.
Yes. That's a lizard wizard.
Oh, wizard or lizard?
You know the lizard brain, right? So.
The lizard brain. And so what is that about, actually?
Sure. Well, just so you know, in university, my major was psychology. And I'm not a psychologist, and I dropped out to start my first business, to push it forward. So, but that being said, I kept up to date with certain things. Our brains basically have two operating systems. Our logical operating system, one you know of yourself, the one that does your taxes, does the math, taxes. And then you have your other operating system, which in the sciences, they literally refer to it as the lizard brain or the hindbrain. And there are two separate operating systems that work on totally different rules, like iOS versus Linux or Android versus Windows. And with a lot of big advancements have been made in the last 20 years with regards to how the brain actually works. And what they discovered is that our lizard brain is literally running the game. And it has a whole different language. It speaks totally a different language than our logical brain. And the lizard brain has no capacity for logic. It can't do your taxes, for example. Lizards cannot do their own taxes. But it has huge control over your emotions. It controls your emotions. It controls all the sensory input. It controls your autonomic functions, the heart beating, your breathing, the liver doing its thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what they discovered is that if the lizard brain has predispositions or associations with, in terms of reality, it will literally transform what you see and hear and feel and taste based on these predispositions. And it has a huge impact in terms of your ability to learn, your ability to concentrate, to be happy, to be healthy. So it's a very important subject. I find it fascinating. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, great. Thank you. And yeah, so what's the future for StudioWeb? So do you have any big project coming up? Anything?
Yeah, well, we just did a huge rewrite of the app from scratch because after years and years of patching it based on, we get a panic call from a school, we need to do this. So we quickly build a patch. And after a while, code base gets messy. And so at some point, you have to make that decision to pull the trigger and say, okay, we need to rebuild based on now we have a solid understanding of the use case. So we did that big move and we did the big reskin. We're doing refinements now in terms of the feature set, expanding some things here and there. And yeah, it's just, we're at that stage where it's much more about just getting the word out about it a bit more. And I'm very confident of the product. I think I'm biased. I think it's the best out there, but I'm biased, but at what it does. So that's the move now, is just to refinement and marketing.
Right. And are you also considering offering StudioWeb in other languages apart from English?
If the demand is there, right? It's interesting. We're in the Caribbean, we're in Africa, South Africa, Nigeria, and they haven't asked yet. And I think it's partly because of my delivery style, because Canadian English is known to be very understandable, apparently, internationally. We're kind of like white bread, very simple, understand, no heavy accents. So apparently, from what I've been told, people whose second language is English are able to follow along quite nicely. But,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
Because
Great.
coding is in English, right? Mostly.
So let's pretend that StudioWeb doesn't exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which learning resources would you recommend?
Good question. I'm not up to date with all of the competitors out there. I don't know who's good, who's not good. There's big platforms like LinkedIn Learning and of course Udemy, and I think I'm sure there's good courses on Udemy. You just got to find them. For me, once you get your fundamentals, I recommend you get this refactoring book, which is very famous, and you get this design patterns book from O'Reilly, which is pretty good. It's very good. And then you just learn as you go. You just get in the ring and you start coding and you learn that way. I think people spend a little bit too much time in the gym and not enough time in the ring.
Yeah, that's that's a great point. Great. And I remember that you switched from just doing just short videos to live streaming, right? I think it's about a year now you've been doing live streaming, maybe a little bit less. Why did you decide to do more live streaming?
I liked it. It was fun.
Okay.
I do what I like now,
Mm.
and I just enjoy the interaction. And in all honesty, it's I don't have to edit after, which is good.
Yeah.
You
Get
know
it.
what I mean, right? You know what I mean.
Yeah, I get it.
But I just enjoy the interaction. It's like a group. We got a group of people. Sometimes I get 100 people. Sometimes 200, 300. I don't schedule them as religiously as I should. I plan on doing that because I've been just really busy with business in the last 6 months with the pandemic, and I'm invested in other things as well. And but I plan on doing more regular streams. It's just a lot of fun. It's getting the comments coming in, and people get to you're starting to know. I know people. I know the people that come on a regular basis, and they know each other. So we got a community going. So it's cool. It's cool.
Great. I'm also looking forward to do some live streaming too. I'm excited, but I'm also nervous about it. I don't know how that's going to go.
No,
Uh,
you'll do good, man. You'll do good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're done. Thank you very much, Stefan, and hopefully, maybe in the future, you might we have StudioWeb in German, and I can tell it to my German friends.
I would be all into it. I would be all into it. It's fantastic. I've been to Germany once and on business years ago. Düsseldorf. I was there for two
Düsseldorf. Oh,
weeks.
yeah, that's where I did my apprenticeship. Düsseldorf. Yeah,
Uh,
Düsseldorf.
Fantastic beer. It's a thing I remember the most. Is the beer is amazing.
Mm.
It's been a
Great.
long time, but yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And the woods. Your woods are very organized in Germany. They're all clean.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. All right. Thank you very much, Stefan. Thanks for taking your time, and I wish you the best.
You
Um,
too.
See you. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye bye.